And so the element there of deliberate intent, we don't believe there's been substantial evidence of that to support a guilty verdict beyond a reasonable doubt. We also heard testimony, Judge, that the defendant was scared, that his demeanor was that of that he was scared. We heard his statements that he said he did what he had to do. I shot my friend, but he shot at me first. I did what was necessary. We have all of these statements of fear. We have the evidence that the defendant had a bloody nose, scratches, and Jeremy Martin's bruised fists. And even their expert confirmed that those injuries to Mr. Chan did not appear to be self-inflicted. We have the projectile in the ceiling that shows the evidence of this struggle in the room, the possible gunshot residue on Martin's hands, the possible DNA of Martin being a contributor on the gun, indicating this struggle. Let's look at second-degree murder, Judge. The UJI is 14-210, and the elements are that the defendant killed Jeremy Martin, that he knew his acts created a strong probability of death or great bodily harm, and in this case, since we have evidence of self-defense, the elements are that the defendant did not act as a result of sufficient provocation and that he did not act in self-defense. The state has to affirmatively prove that he did not act in self-defense, and they haven't presented any testimony from a use of force expert saying that this shooting was not justified or that it wasn't in accordance with what he was trained to do as a Santa Fe County Sheriff's Officer when you perceive an imminent deadly threat. To the contrary, we have evidence that he was scared and he said he didn't do it, that he had to shoot him in self-defense. The other element that's really, I think, key for the court's consideration is sufficient provocation. Second-degree murder, of course, requires that the defendant did not act as a result of sufficient provocation. And I know it's kind of hard to wrap one's mind around the double negatives here, but the only evidence that the state has presented is that of provocation, of being punched in the face, of a scuffle, of this intoxication that led these men in this situation in the room. They haven't presented any evidence that there's anything other than provocation. So because of that, Your Honor, second-degree murder, we believe, is an inappropriate charge to go back to the jury. In fact, if the court looks at the use notes for second-degree murder, it says this instruction is to be given. The second-degree murder instruction is only to be given when provocation is at issue. So whenever there's something indicating that the defendant was not provoked, then it's appropriate to send second degree. Here, there's no evidence that this was just this, he wasn't provoked. The evidence is to the contrary, that he was punched in the face, and that in fact, through Foster, that his face it was reasonable that his face was shoved into the bed with those bloodstains. So we believe that second-degree murder is completely, it's something, Your Honor, that this court, as a gatekeeper of miscarriages of justice and of spurious verdicts, and verdicts not supported by the actual evidence, should exercise its discretion in finding that there's insufficient evidence for second degree. With voluntary manslaughter, it's 14-220, which is on the screen. That indicates that what I just kind of said, that the difference between second degree and voluntary is sufficient provocation. And so that's the difference here, that the defendant has to be sufficiently provoked as a result of, and that's what reduces it to second degree murder. Some examples of provocation, I think, and I highlighted here, would be an anger or a heat of passion. This is in the committee commentary. And again, if there's, the state, in order for the element to second degree, has to prove that it was not an anger or a heat of passion, that it was something else. And there's no evidence of that. So these are the actual elements of the voluntary manslaughter, again with the highlighted ones that we think that the state has failed to prove. Your Honor, the key one here is the self-defense, that he did not act in self-defense. They haven't presented any evidence that he did not. All the evidence is to the contrary. And we'd ask the court, going back to the standard in the beginning of the directed verdict, under Rule 5607, whether substantial evidence of either direct or circumstantial nature exists to support a verdict of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And with respect to the second-degree murder, Your Honor, respect to first degree, intoxication negates specific intent. And with second degree, they have not felt that he did not act as a result of provocation. So we'd ask the court to direct a verdict with respect to first degree and second degree.
Ms. Garcia, basically you're asking the court to overlook what it believes is a critical component that directs the court to deny the motion for a directed verdict. The testimony was clear that there was an early incident or early conflict between the two individuals that, as a result of some initial altercation, that Mr. Chan, and I believe the testimony is on the record, that Mr. Chan went out for a walk, that he was in other parts outside, that, and you're suggesting to me that to focus in only on that very narrow scope of time, the court can't do that. It has to look at the totality of the presentation by the state. So could Mr. Chan, during that period of time, and could a jury infer from the actions of the defendant that he had more than sufficient time to plan some act of retaliation against Mr. Martin? And so that, along with the fact that certainly there's a right to self-defense, but as you well know, it cuts off at a point where you're no longer threatened. And there's been an abundance of testimony that Mr. Martin, at some point, left the room, that the door was closed behind him, that the door was closed to the room. There's testimony suggesting that he would have had to have opened that door. We've had testimony in terms of the length of time that it takes to shut the door. Mr. Chan easily could have stayed in the room. Did he need to carry out the acts that again, I know that there isn't testimony in terms of exactly, no one can say exactly what shot led to the actual death of Mr. Martin, but it could be the cumulative, that can be easily inferred, the cumulative number of shots. So the court believes that there is certainly more than sufficient testimony that would, because I'm not trying to simplify the standard related to a motion to a directed verdict, but you're familiar with the case law just as well as the court. And the case law suggests, is there sufficient evidence that has been presented at this point from which a reasonable juror could conclude that the state has proven the elements of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt? And the court believes that there is that basis at this time, and therefore denies the motion. I'm not going to go into the second degree or the involuntary manslaughter. I'll leave that for you to make a determination as to whether you'll offer those options to the court later in the proceeding. But in terms of the first-degree murder, the court only believes that it must address that in the directed verdict, and the court denies the motion. So, thank you. And again, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I will need to go on to getting ready because the jury is already here. Let's see, forgive me. Mr. Clark, do I look to you to let me know because I don't have a list of witnesses in the order that they are to be called. Do you have that, or Mr. Day, do you have that you can present it to the court?
We do have, I would turn Ms. Garcia to give the lineup, but we'll be calling the state's DNA expert first.
Okay, and I'm not hearing you that well, Mr. Clark. The DNA expert, I heard that.
Yes,
I don't know who that is.
I don't want to butcher her name, Your Honor. It's Ms. Suma Kumar.
Okay, so do I have a final written list to be provided?
Yes, you do. It was just formulated yesterday when we found out who the state was going to call in their case in chief. We can write it out for you.
No, I'm just asking the simple question. Do you have a written list for me to work from? Do you have it now?
The one that was filed previously has all of our witnesses on it. Or we can give you a handwritten list of the order today, right now.
I'm almost certain that it doesn't because we even had a discussion up here. Let me see.
Ms. Garcia will write it out for you right now, Judge.
Okay, so let me just go over that list again, just to make sure that I'm comfortable knowing who's going to be testifying. I still have Josh Sexow. Is that a yes or no?
Yes.
Ian Robles?
Yes.
Nicole James?
Yes.
Maurice Moya?
Perhaps.
It's either Cecil or
Cecile, Dr. Cecile Marchinsky, yes.
Cecile Marchinsky. That's a yes. Mike Spence?
Possibly.
Okay, but not certain at this point.
Not certain.
Okay. Sergeant Casey Mullins?
Yes.
Sergeant Mark Pacheco?
Possibly not.
Corporal Nathan Seguda?
No.
William Chapman Barty?
Yes.
Let's see. Again, your DNA expert.
Her full name is Raman, R-A-M-A-N, Sandhu, S-A-N-D-H-U, Kamir, K-I-M-K-I-R-M-E-R, Kamir.
And again, she goes by
Mrs.
Kamir. All right, thank you.
And then-
Officer Max Weir,
Yes.
Detective Casey Thatcher,
Yes.
and Lieutenant Mullins. Oh, I already went over that.
And then Leah Tafoya.
And again, we'll still have to address that issue.
Yes. And then
Do you expect were you intending to use Mr. Foya today?
I don't anticipate us getting to Mr. Foy today, quite frankly.
Anyone else?
And then the defendant.
So may I impose upon you at some point this morning to give me a written list and in the order that they're going to be testifying over the next few days?
Yes, sir. The first three witnesses, just for the court's edification and for the state, Ms. Raman Sandhu Kamir, Nicole James, and Dr. Cecile Marchinsky. And those, that's a set order. Those, all three people are from out of town, need to go.
You're right, I wrote them down in order.
Yes, please. Thank you. And these are the ones just for today?
These are all of them.
Everybody?
Everybody, in order, and we gave up to the state level.
Your Honor, before Ms. Garcia comes back, Ms. Garcia and I approached the bench about a request for court date earlier. Dealing with Max Weir, Officer Max Weir.
Oh, and excuse me, weren't you intending to call Detective Lawless back on the stand for?
It may be unnecessary, Your Honor. If certain exhibits can be agreed to and introduced to another witness, then it will not be necessary to call Detective Thomas.
Right, and I believe, let me look for the list. I believe I'm a little bit still. How has the defendant's final exhibit list changed? I know that we admitted some exhibits, but anything remaining, let's see, we didn't do Dr. Trumpeter's PowerPoint. We have photos of Jeremy's hands right and left. I don't think we're introducing that again, are we? Because I think it's already in.
No, Your Honor, that's
Okay,
correct.
so that's off. There's photos of Jeremy's neck and finger. I'm assuming you wouldn't be using that anymore.
No, Your Honor, that's correct.
And then we have 7 photos of Tai Chan's face and right shoulder, left neck, and hand. I believe that's already into evidence.
Yes.
So I don't think we're using that. Number 8 is a blow-up scan of room 711. I don't think we need to have that introduced again.
We probably won't, Judge. Because they use the scanner on the overhead, it became unnecessary.
So I have a photo, and then a photo of room 711 facing the door. We've had several of those already. Somehow this is different. We have number 10 is the exterior photo of room 711 hallway. We have a number of those. So I'm assuming that you won't introduce them, any additional. I'm making these assumptions. You can certainly correct me.
No, Your Honor, you're correct.
Number 11, photos of door to room 711 hallway with draft measurement as prepared by the student.
That's already been admitted.
Yeah, that's in part of the scanner, I believe, testimony. There's the use of force model diagram. I don't think you're going to introduce that since the witness has already left. There's the OMI diagram of Mr. Martin with 4 pages.
That's already been introduced.
Okay. And then again, the resume of Maurice Moyan, we still will certainly have a discussion. So then I'm unclear, other than what has already been admitted, what remaining exhibits the defense would have.
Yes, and I can answer that, Judge. It would be the exhibits that were admitted in the state's case last year, but were not admitted this year, specifically a short video of Jeremy Martin at the front desk of the Encanto.
Is this in the order that you'll be using them or not?
Yes.
Okay, so there's what's the length of the video?
Oh, it's 5 seconds.
Video?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's 2 videos, short again.
Okay, but one would they would be separate exhibits.
Yeah, let's
correct?
do them separate. So
So-
one would be a video of Tai Chan running in the main parking lot.
Okay.
And then the other video is Tai Chan in the main parking lot, but he's on his phone. It's a different camera. And Judge, we're going to put each video on a separate jump drive. Those are already ready, and we can introduce them to the court on each separate jump drive.
Okay, what other, these are 3, what else do you have?
Other than what's already been admitted, that's all.
And they would be, how would they be numbered? 1, 2, and 3? Or did we use those up already?
We use those, Your Honor. I have one as a photograph of Jeremy Martin at the hotel front desk,
Okay.
looking for Tai Chan.
That's fine. So these would be, what, 5, 6, and 7?
Well, yeah, my numbers are a little off because if the court recalls the diagram with Edward Hazelwood, the court had us mark that as Exhibit 5, but it hasn't been entered, and we don't plan to enter it. So we can replace that with these videos.
All right. So I would anticipate that that 5-second video in the front of Hotel Encanto would be, and again, this is, I'm not admitting, I'm just wanting to number them so I can reference them on the record. Okay, so that would be exhibit number 5. The video of Mr. Chan running in the parking lot would be number 6. And then the video with him on the phone in the back parking lot would be number 7. Mr. Burke or Mr. D'Antonio, will the state have any objection to these proposed exhibits? Are we able to pre-admit them?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so-
State may agree. Excuse me, court may agree.
Thank you. So the court is going to. So.
Judge, there are actually 2 additional. One was the extraction report with Ware.
Okay, let me just finish the record. I just want to make sure. State, defendants exhibits 5, 6, and 7 have been evidence. What is the,
It's the, if the court recalls, we were going to introduce the 16-page extraction report through Officer Ware. The state had introduced 3 pages, and the court, we were going to introduce all of it.
okay, tell me that again. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the first part of what you just told me.
It's-
A proposed exhibit 8 is what? Just describe it to me again.
The Jeremy Martin's phone extraction report, 16 pages.
shown that exhibit to the state?
Yes, that's what Mr. Bernard wanted to approach on.
I see, okay. So let's discuss that matters in case we have an issue with the labeling. Apparently one of the jurors is running, hasn't arrived yet, so I've had Mr. Avalos take the phone number for her just to make sure that they're on their way. So go ahead and approach.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So, Mr. D'Antonio, I'm going to ask that the state has already indicated in the record that it rested subject to the motion to move into evidence certain exhibits. We now have a final rendition of what all of the exhibits are that were admitted into evidence, and then the state has withdrawn certain other exhibits that weren't admitted into evidence. So I'm going to be looking to you to indicate to the jury that you've rested your case so that we can then go on to the defendants.
Rather than state,
Do you mind moving the microphone a little bit closer in your direction?
before the state judge can fully assert this court that in fact has rested, we have one little issue regarding Dr. Wan, who is going to be considered a rebuttal witness. We understand now that although Dr. Wan is available all week, he's only available on Monday, not Tuesday, when we expect the final day of the presentation will be. So we're in a little bit of jam now. We're not sure. Discussing rearrange the schedule to fit Dr. Wan.
Well, again, what the court had indicated, really right now the court has 35 hearings on Monday. Moving that mass is extremely difficult.
I understand, Judge.
So what I can try to do is, you would be calling Dr. Wong for what purpose?
To read about the testimony on alcohol consumption.
And that would be coming from what?
Dr. Marquez, I believe her name is.
Dr. Cecilia Marchinsky.
Oh, she's going to be testifying today.
Yes, Your Honor.
One of the things that we did was allow the defendant to present the witness out of order. I would suggest that if upon the completion of that testimony, if you still believe that there should be a rebuttal witness, then the court is amenable to having Dr. Wong testify either this afternoon or tomorrow.
That's
Bring him in Monday. I mean, the best that we're going to do, if we can't finish by Friday, we have to come in on Tuesday. That's the beginning of the new court's trial calendar, and although we have another trial that was supposed to be proceeding on Tuesday, obviously the completion of this matter would be a priority. So if we can't complete matters by Friday, we're going to then complete matters next Tuesday, not Monday.
I understand, Judge, and the court's suggested accommodation is appreciated and accepted on the state.
And again, Mr. Clark, again, it's up to the court really to the alignment of witnesses and at what point they can testify. The court has ultimate control of that issue. We extended that courtesy to Dr. Trumper, and I would assume that that would be an acceptable alternative to the court.
Judge, I'm not going to be in a position to deny anyone to make an argument or deny that same courtesy to Dr. Wong.
Okay. So when is he available, either this afternoon or tomorrow?
All day today, all day tomorrow.
Okay, so maybe to maintain the flow of the defendant's case, what we would do is go to Dr. Wong first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay, very good, John.
That way the defense can keep on, and then that way it's more of a an actual rebuttal witness if you feel that it's necessary to call it after the testimony that is given. I'm not sure that you feel that it is, but we haven't heard that testimony. And if we do Dr. Wong, we'll do it tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Your Honor, if I may, in that situation, we would like to take a statement from Dr. Wong. I understand he's going to sit for testimony today. We haven't had a chance to conduct a pre-trial review. We'd like that opportunity.
Okay, but you can do it this afternoon.
That's my
You certainly can do it this afternoon if he's going to be here, and if we're done with the witnesses, the witness that he would be here to rebut, I'm sure he's going to sit in, listen to that testimony, and he's going to be made available to you this afternoon, but not in a manner that will disrupt the trial.
And of course,
So-
Your Honor, and he's in the audience right now, so I understand we will arrange to do that interview this afternoon.
Okay, so all I'm saying in terms of the last comment, it would have to be one of the defense attorneys interviewing him, because I'm not going to recess the trial so that we can conduct an interview.
No, we're not asking for that.
Thanks, I know you're not, but I just wanted to make myself clear. All right, let's go ahead. But subject to that, Mr. D'Antonio, I will look to you.
Say what you want.
Comes in, basically to indicate to the court that you have rested your
Yes, sir.
case. Thanks, sir. And could we have is it Dr. Ramir?
Mrs.
Oh, Mrs. Could you have her come forward, please?
She's coming in.
Mrs. Sandu, come here. Join us here at the witness chair. Thank you. Thank you. Take your seat. Good morning. Mr. D'Antonio, is there any further witnesses to be presented by the state?
There's not, Your Honor, the state arrested.
The state, for the jury's information, the state is not going to be calling any further witnesses at this stage of the proceeding. They have rested their case. We will now begin. The court has addressed some legal issues outside of the jury, and we will now go forward with the defendant's case. Mrs. Sandu Kamir, good morning.
Morning.
Let me ask you if you will please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you very much. Go ahead and take your seat.
Thank you, sir.
And if you would please, for our record, give us your complete name and spelling of your last names.
My name is Raman Sandhu Kurmer. Last name is spelled as SANDHU-KIRMER.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, again, good morning to you. If you would please commence with your direct examination of this witness.
Yes, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you start off by telling the jury where you're currently employed?
I'm a DNA serology forensic scientist with the New Mexico Department of Public Safety Northern Forensics Laboratories in Santa Fe.
How long have you been employed with the Northern Forensics Laboratories?
I have been there for over 4 years now.
If I might,
Go ahead, Mr.
the
Burke.
state, in order to save time, the state will stipulate that Ms. Sandu Kurmer is an expert witness in the field of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA comparison, and DNA analysis.
All right, but even if there's a stipulation, the court doesn't see any issue with some brief description of this witness's background for the information to the jury. However, based on the fact that there is no objection, the court is going to designate Mrs. Sandhu Kermer as a expert witness related to DNA comparison and analysis. With that, Mr. Clark, proceed.
Thank you. Ma'am, could you tell the jury what, to describe to the jury what your job duties are to that?
I examine and perform scientific analysis on physical evidence in criminal investigations and try to determine the biological fluids such as semen, saliva, or blood that might be present in an item of evidence, and try to also identify the DNA source of those samples. In addition to all of this, I testify in court as and when necessary.
And please explain to the jury, prior to your appointment at the lab, give the jury some idea of your educational background.
Prior to working at the forensic laboratories for the crime lab, I worked as a clinical pathologist in the field of cytogenetics for almost 7 years with Genzyme Genetics. I have a bachelor's in botany, chemistry, and zoology, and specific coursework as is required by my current job in biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics, and population statistics.
Do you have you undergone any on-the-job training since you've been employed with the laboratory?
Absolutely. I had to undergo the training program for becoming a forensic scientist with my laboratory for almost a year. It establishes a theoretical knowledge, first by attending lectures, reading scientific journals, literature, etc., as well as observing competent analysts performing all the techniques that are performed in the lab. In addition to this, the training program establishes a practical knowledge, first by performing all of these methods under the supervision of the competent analysts, and then on my own. The culmination of that training program was in the form of a comprehensive written as well as practical examination that I had to pass before I could start working independent casework.
Right. And does part of that training include formal education in the DNA testing process? Or let me ask this way. Does part of your training include education as it relates to DNA analysis?
Absolutely. Every aspect of DNA analysis that we use in forensic samples, we are trained to perform that, to do the methodology and the techniques, as well as remain current in the ever-changing field of DNA technology. I am required to have at least a minimum of 8 hours of ongoing education per year.
And ma'am, have you ever testified as an expert witness in New Mexico or anywhere else?
I have testified over 20 times now as an expert witness in DNA serology in the state of New Mexico.
All right, so with those qualifications and the stipulation as to your designation as an expert, I'd ask you to talk to the jury a little bit about what DNA is specifically.
DNA is the blueprint of life. It is the hereditary material that is passed on from generation to generation. We get half of our DNA from our mother and half of it from our father. That makes every person's DNA profile unique to them. No two people share their DNA profile other than identical twins. So it's a very individual, specific profile other than identical twins. If we think of DNA as a very simplistic series of numbers, we would all have a different serial number, and it determines characters like how tall we will be, what's our natural hair color, the color of our eyes, etc.
Right. And explain to the jury what forensic testing is and how forensic testing relates to the analysis of DNA.
Forensic science is a branch of science that helps with the identification and individualization of science and in terms of physical evidence. since DNA is so unique to every person, that property is used to first get some kind of a DNA information from the item of evidence. So if I have the DNA profile from an item of evidence, I will compare it to the DNA profile from a known person and try to determine if they came from the same source or they came from different sources.
And so in any given case, what's the process? I believe you've described in the past that DNA testing involves a two-step process. Would you explain for the jury what that is?
Would you like me to start with the serology part and exactly the...
Yes, ma'am.
When I first get an item of evidence, I visually inspect it to make sure the integrity of the item is maintained and there are no tears on the packaging, the seals are intact. I will then place it on my bench, which is clean, has been bleached down, and don my PPE, which is personal protective equipment, disposable gloves, lab coat, mask, the whole spiel. I visually inspect the item of evidence for any defects or stains. For example, typically in a homicide, if I see red-brown stains, I will test it chemically for the presence of blood. If I see that, I will take a little cutting from that area and put it in a sterile plastic tube with a lid and then take it further. The next step is to isolate the DNA from everything that's surrounding it. I require only the DNA, not the fabric or the other cell components that might be present. Once I have this isolated, purified DNA, I will quantify it, which basically means I'm trying to estimate how much DNA is actually in that sample. If I do not have enough to proceed, I will just report it as did not have enough DNA. I could not make any kind of interpretation. However, if it meets our minimum quantity for carrying further analysis, I will then take it through amplification, or PCR as it is known in short. And what it is a very high quality scientific DNA duplication process. So with the help of chemicals and heat, the DNA, for that very small amount of DNA, is multiplied to give me an amount from which I can actually conduct DNA analysis. It is then separated through a scientific instrument as per the size, and it generates a DNA profile, which is a series of peaks. And it is this data that I compare to a known profile and try to make interpretations and comparisons.
Can you tell us, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what steps you take in your laboratory to prevent contamination or to ensure the accuracy of your, or the integrity of your analysis?
When an item or a case is first brought into the laboratory, it is entered into our digital as well as physical chain of custody. So that from that point onwards, all the evidence transfers that occur for that item and that case, they are recorded. While it's not being tested, the member from evidence unit will store it in an evidence vault, the access to which is limited. And once I request the items of evidence for a case that I will be testing, it is in my custody and in my personal locker, the keys to which are limited to me and my supervisor. And once I'm done with the testing, it is again returned to the evidence vault. This is to make sure that the evidence, we know where it is and under whose custody at all times. In addition to that, the DNA lab specifically has access only limited to the DNA analysts as well as upper management. In addition to this, we make sure that no cross-contamination is occurring, first by bleaching down everything in the lab at least once a month with 10% bleach. And my personal bench space, I sterilize it with the solution, bleach solution, after every case. I only look at one item of evidence at a time to avoid that cross-contamination that might occur between two samples. I wear my personal protective equipment that includes disposable gloves, face masks, lab coat, and the consumables that I use, like pipette tips, razor blades, they are one-time use only, and the tubes are not just autoclaved, but they are sterilized under the UV cross-linker. And all of this is so that any unwanted DNA from myself to the evidence or from evidence to evidence is avoided. In addition to this, we also run what is called as controls. Controls are samples, known samples that are run side by side with all the forensic samples, and the results of these controls are known. So the positive control should display a known DNA profile, and that tells me that the technology or the method that was being run was run accurately and it produced the results that it should have. And the negative controls should have nothing in them, which again tell me that there was no cross-contamination occurring and everything is as it should be.
So after you've done your analysis, do you arrive at some sort of mathematical statistical calculation? And what does that mean? Tell the jury what the statistical calculation is. What meaning that has to be?
Anytime I make the interpretation of a DNA match, that means that I am either including somebody in that evidence sample, or I am stating that the DNA profile from the evidence sample and the DNA profile from a known person are the same without any unexplainable differences. It's not just enough for me to say, yes, this profile matches this person. I have to give a statistical weight as to how rare or common this DNA profile is. That's why with every match that we make, I have to provide a statistical estimate of how rare or common that profile is by listing it in my case report.
All right. Now, let's turn to the case at hand. You received, or did you receive some items of potential evidentiary value in the case regarding Mr. Chan and the death of Jerry McConnell?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Do you have your report with you?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right. If you need to refer your report, let me know. It's going to be asking you about some things, okay?
Okay.
All right. So when did you first receive items at your lab regarding this case, and who did you receive them from? What?
Your Honor, may I refer to my notes, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Did you mean the first round of testing that I did in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
The items for the first round of testing were received by a member of our evidence unit on November 19th, 2014.
And after you received these items of evidence, did you then begin conducting your analysis in an attempt to arrive at a statistical analysis?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Now, there are, your findings related to the report?
Pardon me?
Were your findings regarding this first batch or round of testing reduced to a report?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what's the date on that first report?
My first report was issued on February 2nd, 2015.
Okay. And I'm going to be asking some questions. You have that report in front of you?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now, items you received, if you go down through the list and just tell the jury, if you will, what items you received from Los Cruces Police Department, and I'm going to ask you about something.
Okay. These are the items that I tested for DNA analysis. Item number 16 was a handgun. Item number 26 was a known DNA standard from Tai Chan. Item number 32 were blue jeans. Item 33 was a shirt. Item 44 was a pillowcase. Item 45 was a pillowcase. Item number 46 was a watch. Item 52 was a bed sheet. Item 56 was a projectile lodged in a hand towel. Item number 57 was a white container. Items 78 and 79 were projectiles. Item number 81 was a swab from marker number 10. Item 84 was a swab from letter C. Item 87 was a swab from letter F. And item 111 was a known DNA standard from Jeremy Martin.
All right. Now, let's talk about the DNA standards first, okay?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to the jury what a DNA standard is?
A DNA standard is a known sample from an individual. So if it was my DNA standard, it simply means that either blood was submitted, known blood from me, or a cheek swab from the inside of your mouth or your buccal swabs was taken on a sterile Q-tip, which is called a swab, and submitted as a known standard. So I would expect to find the DNA profile of the person from whom that DNA standard was submitted.
All right. And did you in fact find a DNA profile for the two standards that were submitted to you, and were they of the people that were reported to you?
I did obtain 2 DNA profiles from each of those standards, and they were submitted as being from the individuals, and that's what I report them as.
And do you have any reason to believe the standard you received from Jeremy Martin or the standard you received from Tai Chan weren't those individual standards?
I don't have any reason to believe that, but that's what they were submitted as.
Okay. Now, let's talk first about some bedding you received, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm referring specifically to item number 44, 45, and 52.
Yes, sir.
All right. So explain to the jury, well, let's talk about it individually. What is item 44?
Item 44 was a pillowcase.
Okay. And item number 45?
Was a pillowcase as well.
Okay. And then item number 52?
Item 52 was a bed sheet.
All right. Now, this bed sheet that you're talking about, was it a comforter or was it like a flat sheet?
Item number 52 was a flat sheet.
And item number 44, 45, and 52, did you conduct a DNA analysis on these 3 items? We'll start with 44, tell the jury what you did and what the results were.
Item number 44 had light red-brown staining. That's indicative of blood stains. So I did perform serology tests, which are basically a series of chemical tests to test for the presence of biological fluids. And in this case, I did a presumptive test to test for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on item 44. I then took it through the DNA process, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan was the source of the DNA profile identified on item 44. Similarly, on item 45, I again saw some red-brown stains, tested it for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on item 45 as well. And once again, Tai Chan was the source of the DNA profile identified on item 45. Lastly, on item 52, the bed sheet, it was again tested for the presence of blood, the stains on it, and blood was indicated on this item as well. And to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan was the source of the DNA profile identified on item 52.
All right. Now, you used the term of degree of scientific certainty. Right?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to the jury what that means?
As I said before, when I make any kind of a match, or I'm matching the evidence to a known person, I have to provide a statistical estimate as to how rare or common this DNA profile is. As per the threshold established by my lab, any time the DNA profile is rarer than 1 in 300 billion individuals, I can state it as to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. And that means that in items 44, 45, and 52, the statistical estimate for these 3 items was rarer than 1 in 300 billion individuals. Hence, I could state to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan was the source of the DNA profile identified on these items.
All right. Now, we'll talk in a moment a little bit more about major and minor sources of DNA. But on these three items, 44, 45, and 52, did you discover or were you able to find any other profiles or locate any other possible sources of DNA other than Mr. Chan?
All these three items were single source, and they matched the DNA profile from Mr. Chan.
And was when you say single source, that means only one contributor, correct?
That's correct.
Containing no minor profile?
It was not a DNA mixture. That means more than one DNA profile is present. In this case, it was one DNA profile only, or from one individual.
And did you, on these items, make a determination whether or not Mr. Martin was eliminated as a possible contributor to this DNA source?
In these three, as the source.
Let's talk about item 46 for a moment.
Item 46 was a watch.
And tell the jury what you did when you received the watch, but what was the standard procedure to analyze this watch?
So when I opened up this item of evidence, the watch did not have any staining that I could observe. So in this case, I tried to test for what is called as the touch DNA. Anytime you touch a surface or you come in contact with an object or another person, there is transfer of material. And it depends on your ability, how well of a shedder you are, but we are always depositing skin cells on the things that we touch. And in this case, I swabbed it, or took a Q-tip, a sterile Q-tip, and took a swab of the entire watch and tried to determine who had come in contact with the watch.
Right. And when you say shedder, that's kind of a cat-like, perhaps.
Well, it's...
Tell the DNA, tell the jury, when you say shed, how does that relate to our skin cells being sloughed off and oil or perhaps other biological fluid in our body?
DNA is in every cell of our body, other than red blood cells, but it is in the actual blood serum. It's in the skin cells, it's in your hair, it's in your fingernails, it's in your sweat, your buccal swabs, your cheeks, your saliva. DNA is in every cell of our body, and it's the same DNA that's present, barring some other issues that I will not go into. But we are constantly shedding skin cells. And add to that the sweat that might be on your hand or the oil that might be on your hand, you deposit some of your skin cells and DNA on an item of evidence that you touch. For example, the more I touch this glass, I'm depositing my DNA on it. However, our ability to deposit the DNA skin cells differs. It depends on how often you wash your hands, or if you're sweating, or just in general, some of us are better shedders. That just means we tend to slough off more DNA or skin cells as compared to others, but it's constantly happening. It's a constant process.
And is there any difference between the DNA that would be deposited, say, from a skin cell than that of a droplet of blood or a deposit of semen or saliva? Is it the same DNA, just from a different source?
That's correct. Our DNA is the same in our blood, in our skin cells, and saliva, in our hair. Just the way it's being deposited is different.
All right. So then, with that frame of reference, going back to the watch, I believe you said you swabbed the watch?
That's correct.
and then you analyzed that. Did you analyze that swab?
Yes, sir, I did.
If you could refer to your notes, tell the jury what the result of the analysis of the watch was.
So item 46 was the watch, and a DNA mixture of at least 3 individuals was obtained from item 46. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan was the source of the major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture. Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this DNA mixture.
And then were you able to make any statistical analysis about any other contributors to that DNA profile on the watch?
I had the known DNA standards from two individuals, so those were the only 2 I could compare, and one of them was the source of the major, and the other one could not be eliminated as a possible contributor. And if I may take a minute to explain what a DNA mixture is, if you could imagine tuning a radio station in between 2 stations. There are 2 stations coming in, and you know there are at least 2. There might be more, but those are the ones that are coming through clearer. Sometimes it's easy to discern one station because it's coming in stronger. In a DNA mixture, that would be the major source of the DNA profile. That means that individual contributed most of the DNA to that DNA mixture.
Now, did you have any understanding who this watch was reported to belong to?
I do not say it in my notes, but I did not.
And did you ever learn that this was, at any point in time over the course of the years since this began, that was Tai Chan's watch? Did you ever learn that?
I can't recall.
That's fine. Let's talk for a moment about the minor profile or the secondary profile. And I believe your testimony was that Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated. So explain that to the jury.
When I state cannot be eliminated as a possible contributor, it means that most of this person's DNA profile is present in the mixture, but I cannot state conclusively that it is this person, but he cannot be eliminated. So it means that he could not outrightly be like, no, this is a no match, there's no way this person could be in this DNA mixture. It just means most of his information is there, but I cannot be sure, it's not conclusive.
All right, and so I'd like to ask you a little bit more about this inclusivity, this idea of inclusivity. Tell the jury, if you will, what alleles are.
What alleles? Allele is just an alternate form of a gene, and it is represented by a number. So the fragments of DNA that I am looking at during my DNA analysis, if it is from one person, I should only see one of the peaks or allele, or a maximum of 2 at any one of these locations. If I see more than these 2 alleles or peaks, then that's a red flag that there might be a 3rd person present or a 2nd person present in that DNA sample.
And on the watch specifically, is that what happened when you were analyzing the sample? You saw more than one allele present on any one of the peaks?
More than 2 alleles present, yes, sir. There were, and that's why I reported that there were at least 3 individuals, if not more.
So tell the jury, if you will, then the statistical analysis you were able to come to regarding the DNA profile of the watch.
The DNA mixture that was identified on item 46 occurs with the following statistical estimates of probability of inclusion frequencies. It ranges from 1 in 1,300 individuals for the African American population, Apache was 1 in 440 individuals. Caucasian was 1 in 110 individuals. Navajo 1 in 130 individuals, and Southwest Hispanic population was 1 in 270 individuals.
Okay, so in practical terms, what does that mean regarding the sample on the watch? As far as Hai-Chan goes, it was 1 in 300 billion, right?
It was more than 1 in 300 billion.
And the profile for Mr. Mark, can you tell us with any statistical analysis what the probability of that being Mr. Mark's DNA on the watch?
So the statistics that are provided, they are an estimate of the portion of the population that I would have to look at, whose DNA I would have to look at before I found somebody who could be included in that mixture. And like I said, they range from 1 in 110 individuals for the Caucasian population to 1 in 1,300 individuals for the African American population. And we report these 5 population groups because these are the ones most commonly found in the state of New Mexico.
Okay. Now, you received several other items, projectiles, DNA.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And some clothing.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the clothing, item number 32 was jeans,
Yes, sir.
and there was those were jeans that you learned were Chan's jeans. Did you ever learn them?
I believe it was mentioned in the DNA code form.
Okay. And the only DNA on those blue jeans belonged to who?
I sampled 2 stains from the gene and subcategorized them as item 32A, which was a stain on the leg, and item 32B, which was the stain on the bottom seam of leg. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai-Chan was the source of the DNA profile identified on item 32A. And to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile that was identified on item 32B.
Okay. So on Mr. Chan's jeans, there were separate spots. There were 2 separate spots of blood, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And those spots contain separate profiles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One for Mr. Chan and one for Mr. Martin.
That's correct.
Now, you also received, well, did you receive any other profiles except that of Mr. Chan and that of Mr. Martin?
Off of specifically the genes or any?
Anything. Did you receive any other DNA swabs or profile or DNA standards from any other individuals except Mr. Martin?
I only received those 2 DNA standards for comparison.
All right. Now, finally, regarding this report, I'd like to refer you to item number 16.
Yes, sir.
So item number 16 is what?
Item number 16 was a handgun.
And when you see the handgun, if you walk the jury through exactly how that handgun is tested. There's multiple steps, right?
Yes, sir.
Walk the jury through how the handgun is tested.
When I opened up the packaging that held that item of evidence, I noticed there was pinkish staining all over, and this is typical of latent prints testing. Since latent prints are so fragile, and if they've been requested on an item of evidence, the gun would have gone first for latent prints testing, and they would have used that pinkish residue that I saw all over, and then it would have come to DNA. When I visually inspected it, I did not see any red-brown stains on it, so I took a sterile swab with acetone on it and swabbed the trigger guard, the grip, and the slide of the gun. These are the areas that are typically most handled by the user, and that's why I swabbed these areas to try and see who had handled the gun. And this entire swab was then taken for DNA analysis.
Is there any particular reason or any specific protocol in your department regarding using multiple swabs or on different areas of a gun, or is it standard to use one swab for the entire gun?
It is standard to use one swab because you are trying to get most of the user DNA on one. The more swabs that you use, you are diluting the user DNA. So one swab maximum, you could use two, but this is standard protocol.
And did you deviate in this case at all from standard protocol?
No, sir, I did not.
And that's the standard protocol for what?
For touch DNA swabs off of handguns?
Or for, let's go, say, IMAC?
That's correct.
Which is the protocol that applies to your office, your department, your lab?
This is the way I was trained, and yes, sir, we follow this.
Okay. So then describe to the jury when you say you take a swab, is that just basically a fancy Q-tip?
It is a sterile Q-tip that's been specially packaged to make sure there is no unwanted DNA on it, and then it's taken through autoclaving process that further gets rid of any spurious DNA that might be present on it.
All right. And after you swabbed the handgun, what did you do next?
I isolated the DNA from it and then quantified and took it down the rest of the DNA analysis process.
And ultimately, what were your findings regarding the handgun?
A DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained from item 16. To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan was the source of the major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture. Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this DNA mixture.
All right. And for Mr. Chan, there was a scientific, was a statistical analysis, correct?
It was to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, yes, sir.
So then one rarer than 1 in 350.
Correct.
Okay. And for Mr. Martin, there was also a statistical analysis, correct?
I did provide a statistical estimate for including him, yes.
Okay. And you tell the jury what the statistical analysis for the secondary profile, or the minor profile for Jeremy Martin?
The DNA mixture identified on item 16 occurs with the following probability of inclusion frequencies. For the African American population, it was 1 in 78,000 individuals. For the Apache, it was 1 in 100,000 individuals. Caucasian population was 1 in 6,900 individuals. Navajo, 1 in 16,000 individuals. And Southwest Hispanic was 1 in 41,000 individuals.
So, well, you differentiate between the degree of scientific certainty, which is 1 in 300 billion. That's more than the amount of human beings on Earth, correct?
Yes, sir. Roughly, there are about over 7.5 billion individuals on the Earth, so it is rarer than that.
Did you receive in this first go-round, the first batch of items you tested, did you receive any other handguns during this first batch of testing?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. And on this handgun, were you able to find any other, were you able to analyze any other profiles other than Mr. Martin and Mr. Chan on item number 16?
Those were the only elimination standards I had for comparisons. So other than interpret the evidence with those two, I could not compare any other standard because I had none.
And were you, prior to your testing, provided with any information from the detectives regarding facts in the case or why you were receiving these items?
I was given a gist of the case summary just to help me determine what to look for, if it was the user that was being requested, or was I looking for blood on any items. So that's part of our DNA acceptance code protocol. They give us a little bit of the summary as to what happened and what are they requesting and why.
So you were aware that Mr. Chan was being accused of shooting Mr. Martin, right?
That's correct.
And were you given any facts regarding the case itself, what had happened, if it fought, if it was struggle? Did you know that at all?
Other than the case summary that I received and whatever was in there, there was nothing additionally given.
Okay. All right. So after this February 2nd report, you must have won the case for a while, right?
That's correct.
But then in June of 2016, so last summer, you were asked to conduct a DNA analysis on another item of evidence or item of interest in this case, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So if you can tell the jury what you received to be analyzed and when did you receive this item?
So on June 1st, 2016, a white blanket, item 0054, and swabs from the stairway, item 0094. Those two items of evidence were submitted for DNA testing.
All right. And the white blanket, when you received it, did it look kind of like a comforter, a white comfy comforter?
Yes, sir.
And have you ever seen that comforter before in your office before receiving it on June 1st of 2016?
That was the first time it was submitted for DNA testing.
And who sent that to you?
It was submitted or brought in person by, as per our evidence receipt, it says Dustin Lockridge.
All right. And did you understand that to be a person associated with Los Angeles Police Department?
I am assuming so. I wasn't the one that received it. A member of our evidence unit would have been the one to receive this item of evidence into and take it into custody. So I wasn't the one to receive it into the lab.
Judge Mann, I've got to say that real quick.
Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, I'm going to show you what's been marked state second round. All right, so can you see item number 79 on your screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, we talked a little long ago, about some pillowcases that you analyzed in your first report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just up from marker H, you see a pillow there?
Yes, sir.
And is that consistent with the pillow, the case that covered the pillow that you looked at?
I had a white pillowcase, and that seems consistent with it.
And you received two pillowcases?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if you look, both pillowcases had, did either pillowcase have droplets of what you determined to be blood?
Both of the pillowcases had red-brown stains.
And as we discussed, that turned out to be Mr. Chan, right?
It was positive for blood, and the DNA profile that was recovered from those items matched Mr. Chan.
Okay. Now, when you talk about the sheet, I think you can kind of see right there, there's the edge of what appears to be a flat sheet. Does that appear consistent with what was received by your lab?
That seems to be consistent with, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the item you received in June of 2016, which you marked for identification in your office as 54, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll put my pen on let me ask you, does the item that appears to contain blood, is that consistent with what you received in your office to be analyzed on?
Yes, I did.
So when you were tasked with analyzing the blood, does this appear to represent the item that you tested?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Now, and how did you conduct the testing on the blanket?
So the blanket or the comforter had these red-brown stains all over. I took a cutting from 3 representative stains and took them for, first did serology on them, that is, test for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on items 0054A, B, and C, which were just the designation that I had given them. Sub-itemized those stains as A, B, and C, and they were all indicative of for the presence of blood. I then performed further DNA analysis on them, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Tai Chan was the source of the DNA profile identified on items 0054A, B, and C.
And A, B, and C were just separate samples of the same item, right?
That's correct.
Was a profile that could have been in any way associated with Jeremy Martin discovered on this cup or this blanket?
From the 3 items that are the stains that I took, I only received single source DNA profile, and Mr. Jeremy Martin was eliminated as a source.
All right. Then you were also provided with a swab from stairway, right? That's how you labeled it.
Correct. I was provided with two swabs with light brownish staining and submitted for DNA analysis.
And that was number 94, right?
That's correct.
And tell the jury, if you will, on 94, which is described as a swab on the stairway, what your results were.
I conducted serological testing first on item 0094 since they had the brownish staining. However, no blood was detected on item 0094 and no human DNA was detected for me to make any kind of interpretation or comparisons.
Now, after you conducted the analysis on the bed sheet or the blanket, you did some further work in this case about a month later, right?
Pardon me?
You did some further work in this case later in the summer?
That's correct.
Okay. When did you receive this next report back by the retest?
The third round of additional evidence was submitted on August 24th, 2016. Or I'm sorry, it was June 16th, 2016.
And once you received these items, did you conduct the DNA testing that you described this morning?
Yes, I did.
And did you alter a report on this round of this batch of testing?
I did.
And what's the date of it?
The report was for this round of testing was generated on July 13th, 2016.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm going to show you a photograph again, and I'll ask you about some additional items of testing that you completed regarding letter H or marker H, right?
Yes, sir.
That'd be marker H?
Yes.
Okay. If you could tell the jury what number is associated with your numerical system, what item did you, numerical number did you associate with item H? It's 53, right?
The white sheet with brown bed skirt
Yes.
was item 0053.
Okay. And I'm going to put my pen and I'm directing your attention to the photograph. Is that consistent with the brown bed skirt that you looked at in your lap?
That is.
Okay. And then the white sheet, is that consistent with the bedding that is associated with this photograph, states 79?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we have a floral maroon, on number 55, is a floral maroon print blanket, which is also associated with other items.
Correct.
And I have my pen, which is generally pointing at what appears to be a floral maroon print blanket. Is that what you received in your lap?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell the jury, if you will, what you discovered on item number 53 and 55, 55 being divided up into 3 parts.
I noticed red-brown staining on items 53 and 55. I took one cutting from item 53, the white bed sheet with brown bed skirt from letter H, and item 55 was a maroon floral print blanket from letter H, and I took 3 separate cuttings of 3 separate representative stains and took them all further for serological testing. And blood was indicated on items 0053, 0055A, B, and C.
And then once you discovered from a serology standpoint this was blood, what did you do next?
I then took it further for DNA analysis, and the DNA profile that was obtained from items 0053, 055A, 55B, and 55C, they all matched the DNA profile from Tai Chan. The probability of selecting an unrelated individual at random who could be the source of this DNA profile was approximately 1 in 130 quintillion individuals, and Jeremy Martin was eliminated as the source of this DNA profile.
Now, why was the statistical analysis on this in the quintillions when we've been talking about the statistic analysis being 1 in 300 billion? Why the change?
In between conducting the first 2 rounds of testing and this 3rd round of testing, we made some updates to our standard operating procedures and the way we report our cases. We went to a better, faster, more elaborate DNA kit, and in keeping with the higher statistical estimates that we were getting, we decided to report the statistical estimate now instead of just saying to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. So we're actually giving the numbers instead of just saying it meets the threshold and it's to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. It doesn't change anything. All it is a different way of reporting the same thing.
Does it change, would this new reporting math change anything about the earlier 2 DNA reports that you offered in this case?
If I was to report the earlier 2 reports that were sent out, the only change would be this person, the DNA profile from this matches this person, and the statistical estimate is 1 in however many individuals. So all I would take out was to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. It does not change the interpretation of who was included and who was eliminated. All of those still stay exactly the same.
And does it include the statistical analysis on minor or secondary profile?
It does, and I would still be reporting that as a table.
So then, for instance, the DNA on the watch, the secondary profile on the watch.
Yes, sir.
A moment ago, you gave us a statistical analysis. Would that number change regarding the secondary profile of Mr. Martin on the watch?
I'm sorry, I believe I misspoke. It would not change that statistical estimate or the number. It's just how I'm reporting now that's changed. So that number would still stay the same. Maybe it would be higher if I was to do it in the current kit, but it does not change the interpretation.
Okay. So how many zeros does a quintillion have behind it? A lot, right?
Over at least 9 zeros, I believe. Definitely over those.
Far exceed the population of the world.
That's correct.
Now, let's refer to item 61.
Yes, sir.
Describe to the jury what item 61 is.
Item 0061 was a pair of black Puma shoes from markers N and O.
And you do an analysis, DNA testing, without analysis for DNA testing on those shoes.
I did.
Okay. And what were the results?
On this pair of black shoes, I did not see any kind of staining that was apparent. So I just took a wet swab or a wet swab of the entire surface of her shoe and then tested it for the presence of blood. No blood was indicated. So I reported it as no blood was detected on item 0061. But the user DNA was also requested on this item, so I took a swab of the inside of the shoes. When a person would wear that shoe, that's the area they would tend to leave most of their skin cells or sweat on. So I took a swabbing of that and took it for further analysis.
And what were your conclusions and results of this process?
DNA mixtures of at least 2 individuals were obtained from item 0061. Tai Chan could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this DNA mixture. Jeremy Martin was eliminated as a contributor to the DNA mixture obtained from this item.
And that was on the black pair of Puma sneakers.
That's correct.
There was also another pair of shoes that you received, item number 62, right?
Correct.
Tell the jury, if you will, what your findings were concerning item number 62.
Item 0062 was a pair of brown Merrill shoes from letter Q. I tested it for the presence of blood, and no blood was detected on this item as well. And again, a DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained from item 0062. Tai Chan could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this mixture. Jeremy Martin was eliminated as a contributor to the DNA mixture obtained from this item.
All right. Now, you received, as well in your office, and I'm looking at number 107, you received some hair and fingernail clippings from Mr. Martin, correct?
Correct.
And did you do testing on Mr. Martin, this hair and fingernail sampling from Mr. Martin?
I did, and I subcategorized them as item 107A. Those were the fingernail clippings from the left hand, and item 107B, the fingernail clippings from the right hand.
And I believe what were your findings regarding fingernail?
I tested them for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on items 107A and 107B. And when I took it further down for DNA analysis, no DNA foreign to Jeremy Martin was obtained from items 107A or 107B.
Then number 6, then on number 65 and 67, describe to the jury what 65 is.
Item 0065 was a Springfield Armory magazine with 7 rounds from letter M.
That was just the magazine, right?
Correct.
Did you ever receive the pistol associated with this weapon?
Sir, I'm not a firearms expert. I wouldn't know which gun it belonged to, but other than the other gun that was received, item 0065 was only a magazine with those 7 rounds.
Okay, and then item number 67, well, item number 65 is described as a Springfield Armory XDS PMM magazine with 7 rounds from letter M, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then number 67, can you describe what number 67 is?
Item 0067 was a black Glock .357 model 31 from letter M.
Okay. So did you receive, with those 2 items, did you receive 1 handgun and 1 magazine? Is that what that suggests?
Correct.
And tell the jury, if you will, what the result was from the magazine home, which is with 65.
No blood was detected on item 0065. And human DNA was identified on this item. However, it wasn't in sufficient quantity for me to do any further testing.
And then Let's talk for a moment about item 67, the black clock 227, model 31 from Retrial.
Yes, sir. No blood was detected on item 0067, the black clock. A DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained from item 0067. The major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The probability of selecting an unrelated individual at random who could be the source of this DNA profile was approximately 1 in 6.9 billion individuals. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of the major DNA profile that was resolved. No interpretations or comparisons could be made regarding the minor component of this mixture due to an insufficient quantity of DNA in that mixture.
In this batch, other than what we've talked about, you received some other items, right?
Yes, sir.
Looks like, if you will, tell the jury what, go through the list of what we have to talk about. Starting with item number 1.
So in this round of testing, I received item number 0021, swab from floor in front of elevator, marker number 2. Item 22, swab from inside elevator, floor, marker number 2. Item 23.
Let me stop you there. Were you able to determine if these were blood?
Blood was indicated on items 21 and 22.
And what about 23?
Yes, sir.
And just for sake of this following, who did that belong to?
The DNA profile obtained from items 21, 22, and 23 matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The probability was 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals, and Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of this DNA profile.
All right, then number 20, we're going to talk about number 29. I think you tested number 29 in 4 different places, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell us what 29 is and what the results are.
Item 29 was a pair of dark-colored socks from Tai Chan. I took 4 different samples from stains on these socks and sub-itemized them as items 29A, 29B, C, and D.
Okay. And what were your findings on 29A, B, C?
Blood was indicated on these items, and the DNA profile that was obtained from items or item 29B matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The probability of selecting an unrelated individual at random was 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of that DNA profile. DNA mixtures of at least 2 individuals were obtained from items 29A and 29D. The major DNA profile that was resolved from these mixtures was matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The probability again was approximately 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of this major DNA profile. No interpretations could be made regarding the minor component due to an insufficient quantity of DNA in the sample. And finally, a DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained from item 29C. The major DNA profile resolved from this mixture matched the DNA profile from Tai Chan. The probability of selecting an unrelated individual at random who could be the source of this DNA profile was 1 in 130 quintillion individuals, and Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to that DNA mixture.
That's ABC.
Yes, sir.
Then as we move down, number 80, what was number 80?
Number 0080 was a white material with stain from marker number 9.
And what was your analysis of number 80?
When I tested the staining for the presence of blood, blood was indicated on item 0080. And the DNA profile that was obtained from item 80 matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The probability of selecting an unrelated individual who could be the source of this DNA profile was 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of that DNA profile.
And then 85, 86, 88, and 89, those were all swabs. The locations D, E, G, and K.
Yes, sir.
And what were the results of those findings?
Blood was indicated on items 85, 86, 88, and 89, and the DNA profile that was obtained from these items matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The statistical estimate was 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals, and Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of that DNA profile.
All right, so were any other reports written in this case, were any other items analyzed and not contained in these 3 reports?
No, sir.
Okay. I want to ask you just a few questions about the watch you analyzed.
Yes, sir.
What was the condition of the watch you analyzed? And in particular, was it intact or was it broken?
The wristwatch had a broken band, and that's all I have written in my notes.
And were you ever provided with a black bag for testing, a black bag that belonged to Tai Chan?
No, sir, I was not given any black bag for DNA testing.
Were you ever provided with any holsters?
I was provided with a holster, a Black Hawk holster from letter G.
Letter G. And were there any findings, and which report was that Black Hawk holster?
It was reported in the report that was issued on July 13th, 2016.
Letter G. What number is it?
It was, yes, sir.
And you conducted an analysis on that holster, correct?
That's correct.
And tell the jury, if you will, what your findings were on that Black Hawk holster, which is number 43.
No blood was detected on item 43, and human DNA was identified on item 43, however, not in sufficient quantity for further DNA testing.
Okay. And when you say that, when you say not sufficient DNA to test it, does that mean in your field that nobody touched it, or there's just not sufficient DNA to be tested?
It means due to the limitations of scientific testing, there wasn't enough that met the threshold set by my lab to take it for any further DNA testing.
And then one last question, ma'am. There's a cell phone depicted in Stage 79. Did you ever receive a cell phone for testing for serology or blood or DNA in your laboratory?
No, sir, I did not.
That's the list at this time.
Thank you, Mr. We're cross-examination of witnesses.
Yes, Your Honor. May I have a place? Please, on my service.
Yes, go ahead.
morning.
Now, before getting started with some of the specifics, you indicated, particularly with respect to a couple of exhibits, one being number 16.
Yes, sir.
And would you identify that again?
Item number 16 was a handgun.
Now, you indicated there was a mixture of DNA on that item, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I believe you also indicated that the swab was taken from the, what's commonly referred to as a slide, trigger guard, and was there any other area of the gun that the swab was used to try to collect DNA?
The grip, the trigger guard, and the slide.
Now, prior to submitting it to the DNA lab, had the gun already been fingerprinted based upon your recollection?
Yes, sir.
And is that standard procedure for you?
That is.
Now, please describe again, I know you described it as being within your policies, but are there any other concerns with respect to, let's say, taking a swab from, a single swab from the grip, then a single swab from the trigger guard, then a single swab from the trigger, and then a single swab from the slide?
When a handgun is submitted for DNA analysis and they're looking for user, my goal is to get the maximum amount of DNA from the user onto the swab so that I have enough DNA to conduct DNA testing. And this is why typically we take one swab of these areas that the user would most likely and most often touch. That is the grip, the trigger guard, and the slide. If I was to take a separate swab of each one of these items, I probably would not get enough DNA to conduct any kind of analysis on it.
Now, you've also talked about calculations, mathematical calculations. In
Yes.
order to clarify for the jury, would you please explain what probability of inclusion statistics means?
It's an estimate, probability of how the size of the portion or the portion of the population whose DNA I would have to look at before I found somebody who would be included in that DNA mixture.
And let's assume with respect to the minor contributors on what was submitted to you as 16, a handgun
Yes, sir.
is a Caucasian. What would your statistics be?
For the Caucasian population, the statistics were 1 in 6,900 individuals.
What is the population of the state of New Mexico? Do you know?
It's just over 2 million.
And what is the population of Arizona, if you know?
I do not.
You've indicated what your findings were, that Jeremy Martin cannot be eliminated as a contributor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would it be wrong for a person to represent that DNA belonged to Jeremy Martin?
There is no way I can conclusively say that it was his DNA. I can only say he cannot be eliminated, and that's why I am required to give that statistical estimate.
Now, you mentioned touch DNA, correct?
That's correct.
And that's from skin cells, is that correct?
Mostly from skin cells, yes.
Now, there would be a variety of different ways that touch DNA would be, let's say, on item 16. Is that correct?
Sure.
The gun, the handgun could have been returned to somebody else. Is that correct?
Pardon me, I didn't get that question.
Okay. Let's say Tai Chan could have shown that gun to somebody else. Who touched it? Would a transfer could a transfer take place?
Hypothetically, yes, sir.
And hypothetically, let's say there was a struggle over the weapon. A transfer could take place in that fashion also, is that correct?
Sure.
Now, in the first example or hypothetical I gave you, the gun could have been shown or handed to any number of different individuals who could not be excluded as a contributor to the minor component of the DNA. Is that correct?
If I had their DNA profile to compare, then I could make that interpretation, but since I was only given two, and all I can say is that so-and-so's DNA was present or could not be eliminated. I cannot tell you how exactly it got there.
Now, if we go back up to the watch,
Yes, sir.
and what number is that on your report?
It was item 46.
And was there any other description of the watch that was submitted to you? Other than the watch?
It was submitted as a black Seiko watch with a broken band.
Now, assuming once again that the minor contributor was a Caucasian, what was your calculation regarding the probability of
The DNA mixture that was identified on item 46 for the Caucasian population was 1 in 110 individuals.
Now, backing out to the first submission, again, there were other items, more items submitted to you than what Mr. Clark asked you about. Is that correct?
Other than the ones that I listed?
No, but there were other items that he did not ask you about.
Yes, sir.
Let's go down to number 78. Could you describe what number 78 was?
Item number 78 was a projectile.
And were you able to determine whether there was DNA on the projectile?
I tested it for the presence of blood, and blood was indicated on item 78.
What were your conclusions, if any?
To a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile that was identified on item 78.
How about the DNA of Tai Chan?
Tai Chan's DNA profile was eliminated as a source of that.
Now, moving on down to 79, what's the description on that?
Item number 79 was another projectile.
And were you able to determine whether or not there was DNA on that item?
No human DNA was detected on item 79.
Now, let's move on down to 81. Could you please describe what that item is?
Item number 81 was a swab from marker number 10.
The markers, are those the markers that were utilized by the Las Cruces Police Department with Mark Schroeder?
That was the description that was given to me when the item was submitted for evidence, and these were provided by the submitting agency, that was the Las Cruces Police Department.
Now, were you able to perform an analysis upon the swab number 81?
Yes, I was.
What were your conclusions with respect to item number 81?
Blood was indicated on item number 81.
What was it?
I cannot tell you whose blood it was, but the DNA profile that was generated from that item to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, match the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin.
How about Tai Chan?
Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of that DNA profile.
Let's move on down to item 84, which you described as a swab from letter C.
Yes, sir.
Did you perform an analysis upon that?
Yes, I was.
What was your conclusion and opinion?
Blood was indicated on item 84, the swab from letter C, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile identified. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of that DNA profile.
And let's move down to 87. Were you able to perform an analysis and comparison on that item?
Item number 87 was a swab from letter F. Blood was indicated on this item, and once again, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile identified. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of this DNA profile.
Now, if we can move over to what I'll refer to as your third report. And I want to direct your attention to item number 29.
Yes, sir.
What was the description associated with item number 29?
Item number 29 was a pair of dark-colored socks from Tai Chan.
Now, would you please indicate to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury 29A, stain from the sock. At this time, were you able to determine where the stain from that sock was located?
Yes, sir, I do have it marked in my notes, and it was from the sole of the sock.
And by that, the bottom?
Pardon me?
Would that be the bottom of the sock?
That's correct.
Okay. And were you able to perform any analysis on 29A?
Blood was indicated on item 29A, and a DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained from this item. The major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture matches the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin, and the probability of selecting an unrelated individual at random who could be the source of this DNA profile was approximately 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of this major DNA profile. No interpretations or comparisons could be made regarding the minor component of this mixture due to an insufficient quantity of DNA.
How about what you have marked as 29B, the stain from the sock? First off, can you tell the jurors where from the sock that stain was located?
So all the 4 stains, and this one too, 29B, was from the bottom, the sole of the sock.
Were you able to draw any conclusions from 29B?
Blood was indicated on item 29B, and the DNA profile that was obtained from this item matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The statistical estimate was 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals, and Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of this DNA profile.
And on 29C, also from the bottom of the sock.
Blood was indicated on item 29C as well. And a DNA mixture of 2 individuals, or at least 2 individuals, was obtained from item 29C. The major DNA profile that was resolved from this mixture matches the DNA profile from Tai Chan. The probability was 1 in 130 quintillion individuals, and Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to the DNA mixture that was obtained from this item.
How about number 29B, also from the foot, a stain from the sock, or the bottom of the sock?
Blood was indicated on item 29D. and a DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained. The major DNA profile that was resolved matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The statistical estimate of finding an unrelated individual at random who could be the source of that major DNA profile was 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals. Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of that major DNA profile. No interpretation or comparisons could be made regarding the minor component of the mixture due to an insufficient quantity of DNA.
Now, if you're able to do so, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical. You testified as far as the results from 29A, 29B, 29C, and 29D.
Yes, sir.
Could those spots have resulted from Tai Chan wearing his socks running through the blood of Jeremy Martin?
Sure.
Now, I'm going to drop on down to number 80. Would you please describe exactly what 80 is?
Item number 80 was white material with reddish-brown stains from marker number 9.
And the results were, that was the blood, the DNA of Jeremy Martin was contained on that material, is that correct?
That's correct.
Was there a minor contributor?
No, sir, it was a single source.
How about swab from letter D, which is item number 85 on your report?
Blood was indicated on item 85, and the single source DNA profile from this item matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin. The statistical estimates were 1 in 400 quadrillion individuals, and Tai Chan was eliminated as a source of the DNA profile.
Okay. And how about, and that's swab from letter D, as in David Ray.
Item 85 was a swab from letter D.
And just to move on, are the results the same on 86, swab from letter E, 88, swab from letter K, 89, swab from letter K?
That's correct. All of those had blood indicated, and the DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Jeremy Martin.
Maybe for
Mr. Root, let me suggest to both parties, and I know it's a little bit late to do this, but you're making an assumption that the jury can follow along with what all these letters are. And
yes, sure.
And I can assure you the court can. So I'm concerned that a lot of the testimony isn't clear to the jury. But then you're correlating that to markers, and you're making an assumption that the jury remembers where all those markers are. Some
Yes,
may, some may not.
I now have some photographs which may be helpful, and I'll be very brief with these. Let me show you what's been marked as spaces of number 14. Now, do you recognize what that is? Or can?
It's a gun.
Okay. Let me back up to number 12. Do you recognize anything on that particular photo?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize?
This is one of the items, and I believe it was item 16 that was tested by me, the handgun, because it has the evidence seal for my lab, the DNA section, with my initials and the date that it was tested, as well as my markings on the packaging itself.
Now I'll show you item number 14. Do you recognize this item as it pertains to States Exhibit 12, what I just showed you?
Sure, it's consistent with the Glock handgun, which was item 16.
photograph, excuse me, in one of your analyses, I believe you indicated or made reference to item number, or marker number 10. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I did. It was item 81. That was a swab from marker number 10.
And let me show you that. I know you don't know exactly where it's located, but that is marker number 10. Is that correct?
Sure.
Now, you, correct me if I'm wrong, did you make reference to an item or swab from letter F?
Item number 87 was a swab from letter F.
Let me show you this photograph that's already been introduced. You recognize it? Do you recognize the letter F?
I recognize the letter F.
Okay, but again, I don't want to have to redo all of your examination, but I'm concerned that it's going to trigger questions from the jury. F, what was your conclusions related to item number F?
Item 87, the swab from letter F. Blood was indicated on this item, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was a source of the DNA profile that was identified on item 87.
Mr. Rick, I'm not going to object myself, much I find not to, but when later there's an objection to the other attorney misstating the testimony that was given, I'm going to be able to respond.
And I appreciate that, Your Honor. You're correct. Now, going back, I believe you made reference to number 10. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you indicated there was a swab that was labeled on number 10.
Item number 81 was a swab from marker number 10.
And what were your results?
Blood was indicated on item 81. And to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile that was identified on this item.
And once again, I want to show you another photograph. And I believe in your testimony, you made reference to item C. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, it may be difficult to see, but you see letter C here?
Yes, sir.
And did you analyze a swab which was correlated with item C?
Item number 84 was the swab from letter C.
And what were your results?
Blood was indicated on this item, and to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, Jeremy Martin was the source of the DNA profile that was obtained from item 84.
And it was single source, is that correct?
That's correct.
Your witness.
Thank you.
You show the photograph that's been previously identified as states 15, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you identified that, have you identified that previously as the handgun that you analyzed in this case?
If that was the handgun that came out of the packaging with my seal and markings, yes, sir. That was item 16.
I'm going to use the pen to point to some areas and have you describe if you swap that area. You know what this area of the handgun is?
That's what I call the slide.
Okay. And you swap the slide on both sides
Yes, sir.
and the top.
Yes, sir.
And then this would be what you would call what?
The grip.
You swap the entire grip. Did
Yes.
you swap the entire grip?
I did.
Front, back?
Yes, sir.
this would be what you call what?
Trigger.
Okay, trigger, that's not a good question. Trigger, and you notice the trigger has trigger safety, right? It's a two-part trigger, right?
It's a trigger. The whole thing is yes, sir. Considered to me, yes.
Saw the whole thing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And this wood, this portion here is what?
The trigger guard.
Okay. And you've already relayed to us what the DNA results on the pistol were. The statistical analysis on this pistol was 6,900, correct?
For the Caucasian population, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Rourke asked me what the population of Arizona was, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you been advised of the population of room 711?
No, sir.
You only received standards from Jeremy Martin and Ty Chan, right?
That's correct.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there any recross-examination on that redress?
No, Your Honor.
Does the jury have any questions? Thank you.
Judge, would you like us to approach and anticipate any questions?
Yes. Should the court expect any further questions from the jury? And again, Mr. Rourke, since one of the questions references having the exhibit that would reflect marker number 10, would you put that up on the screen? Senator Hermer, again, I don't believe that there is a specific question related to this, but there are a number of questions for 16, the handgun that you've seen depicted on the screen, the handgun that came to you, did you receive the magazine that was the magazine contained within the handgun? Did you analyze it? And if you did you get any results from it?
As per my reports, I did not receive any magazine for the handgun for item 16.
Does the testing related to DNA, are you able to acquire a source of information from that DNA analysis that would suggest to you the time or date that the DNA would have been placed on the item? Is there a way to do that?
No, I cannot. And under ideal conditions, DNA can stay on a surface for days, even weeks, if it's not wiped clean or it doesn't come in contact with other things. I can only say if I can make any kind of interpretation regarding a known person being on it or not, but I cannot give any timeline as to how it got there, when it got there, or why it got there.
Thank you. I believe that there was a two-part question. Do peers or supervisors review your work? And if so, was your report in this matter reviewed?
Absolutely. We are an accredited lab. That means that we have a certain, when we offer our services, they are offered with a certain degree of assurance, integrity, and quality. And in order to satisfy those conditions, I have to have 2 peers review every case that leaves our lab before it can go to the agency. The first one is called as a technical review. So my entire case, once it's finished, I put it into a case file and hand it to my technical reviewer, who is another competent, certified DNA analyst. And they go over every aspect to make sure I followed all the protocols and everything was done the proper way, followed our policy, and the results and conclusions that I arrived at were the same results and conclusions that they would have arrived at had they been testing this case. Once they sign off as a technical reviewer, this case is then passed on to an administrative reviewer, who again goes through the entire case file and the report to make sure if there were, and catch any grammatical errors that might have been there, and to make sure that the report is accurate and correct. And only once both of these reviewers sign off on every case is the case released to the agency.
This is being posed, I believe, as a hypothetical, but again, in this situation, I think that you know what it will be addressing, so you may want to comment on it as it relates to this particular case. If two individuals were in the habit of having contact on a regular basis, would there be a high probability that both DNAs would be detected on an item if in fact only one individual would have touched the item?
Absolutely, and it is one of the known facts. It's called secondary transfer of DNA. So if I was to go outside and grab a bottle of water, let's say my friend had been drinking from, or shake hands with her, and then I come in and have this glass, I wouldn't be surprised to find her DNA on this glass, even though she never touched it. So that's secondary, sometimes tertiary transfer can happen too, and it occurs.
So I believe that, again, so it doesn't stay in the minds of the jurors. In this situation, you indicated that on the handgun, that you definitely made a definite conclusion that Mr. was on the weapon.
He was the source of the major DNA profile, yes, sir.
And you indicated that Mr. Martin could not be excluded.
Yes, sir.
Was there enough DNA that you found that could have been related to Mr. Martin to suggest that there was direct contact on the weapon, or that it was transferred from Mr. Chan onto the weapon?
I cannot say that. I cannot make any conclusions like that because he cannot be eliminated. He wasn't sourced, or there wasn't one single source profile that matched him. I cannot tell you when it got there or how it got there.
And again, I asked that follow-up question because of the nature of the question that was asked by the jury, so that again, there isn't any greater degree of speculation than what is necessary.
Yes, sir.
Just very briefly, give a summation, once again, although I believe you just did, but once again, give a summation related to the DNA that was found on the weapon, which is the weapon contained within box number 16 that you reviewed.
Item number 16, the handgun. A DNA mixture of at least 2 individuals was obtained from item 16 to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. Tai Chan is the source of the major DNA profile that was obtained from this mixture. Jeremy Martin could not be eliminated as a possible contributor to this DNA mixture, and the probability of inclusion frequencies for the DNA mixture range from 1 in 6,900 individuals for the Caucasian population to 1 in 100,000 individuals for the Apache populations.
Miss Sandhu Kerr be excused, Mr. Burke.
Your Honor, as much as I would like to, I would ask that the President and I can inform the court to be excused.
All right, since she's been designated as an expert witness, is there any objection, Mr. Clark, for this witness if she wishes to remain in the court?
No objection at all, Judge. If you recall, we called her in the first place.
I'm forgiving you.
She can sit where she wants.
Yes. So do you have any objection? So I can't release you as a witness, but and I'll ask you to remain, but if you wish, you can remain in the courtroom, or if you can just remain available to either Mr. Clark or Mr. Rourke to make sure they have your phone number so that they can call you and ask you to return should any additional testimony be necessary.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Let's
sir.
go ahead and take a short recess before we begin with the next witness.
All right.
Let's not exceed 15 minutes of break.
Judge, maybe Joe Scrooge.
Yes.
You're on the
You need
break.
on the record.
No,
Great.
no. We didn't something.
By the way, you're a fantastic witness. I know you've been told that before, haven't you?
I know.
No?
Forgive me, I'm now being told that we can.
I can go home?
Yes, you can go home.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Here. I know, and I have a funky name.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Join us over here at the witness chair, please. James, when I ask everybody to sit down after the jury comes in, will you continue standing to administer your oath?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. James, let me ask you if you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead and take your seat now, please. And come up to the microphone and you can adjust the height to wherever you'd like it. Make sure that you speak up as much as possible, and although the questions are going to be coming from the podium, the attorneys at the podium, try to give as much of your testimony to the jury in front of the microphone. Thank you. Why don't you begin by giving us your complete name and the spelling of your last name?
Nicole Janes, Jaynes.
All right, thank you. Ms. Garcia, you can commence with your direct examination of Ms. Janes.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Janes.
Good morning.
Ms. Janes, do you know Taijian?
Yes,
How do you know him?
he's my mom's cousin.
So he's your second cousin?
I believe so.
Did you have an occasion to see him on the date of October 27th, 2014?
Yes.
Under what circumstances?
He invited me to go to Dublin's.
What is Dublin's?
It's a pub.
Is that located here in Las Cruces?
Yes,
Did you live in Las Cruces in October of 2014?
I did. Yes.
What were you doing why were you living in Las Cruces in October of 2014?
I was a student, an undergraduate student at NMSU.
Now where are you living?
I live in Edgewood, New Mexico.
Do you recall what time it was that Mr. Chan invited you to join him at Dublin's?
I don't recall the exact time.
Did you recall approximately, was it in the evening or in the daytime?
It was in the evening.
Who all, did you just meet him at Dublin's, or explain how you ended into contact with Mr. Chan?
I actually had a sorority function that night, a meeting, and so I missed a phone call and a text message from him. So I actually ended up there a lot later because I was in that meeting.
Do you remember what time your meeting ended?
I know it was after 9 o'clock that we got out that night.
So after 9 o'clock, you met up with Mr. Chan at Dublin's, right?
Yes.
Was there anybody else there?
Yes.
Who else was with Mr. Chan at Dublin's?
There was, I think, 4 other people. Josh, and then I think Ian, Mr. Jeremy Martin, and then one other, I think.
Okay. Did you know any of the other individuals who were there?
Just Josh.
How did you know Josh?
I had met him at a family function before because he and Ty were roommates in college, I believe.
Did you know, and you didn't know any of the other individuals?
No.
When you were at Dublin's, was anybody drinking alcohol?
Yes.
Who was drinking alcohol?
I know Ty and Jeremy had a drink.
Do you know what they were drinking?
I know they at least had one Red Bull vodka.
Do you know, you actually saw each of them, you saw them consuming alcohol?
Yes.
Was there ever a time where either Mr. Chan or Jeremy Martin became upset while at Dublin's?
I wouldn't really call it upset. They were disagreeing about some things.
Can you describe for the jury what you observed at Dublin's in respect to them?
When I was there, they were having some sort of conversation about their job as police officers, and I didn't get all of the conversation because it was kind of jumbled up because I got there so late.
Do you remember hearing anything that either of them said?
I don't remember a lot at the moment, no.
Do you recall if any of the conversations were about a homicide case in Santa Fe?
It's leading. I'm going to sustain the objection on that.
On leading?
Yes. Go ahead and restate the question.
Were you able to hear in your pieces that you heard what they were specifically in disagreement about, or what the argument was about?
Objection, hearsay.
I'll let her describe. She has a general understanding of what they were discussing. She can't say anything in particular to what exactly she heard.
I know that their conversation was about their work. I just don't recall exactly what they were discussing.
Okay. And did Mr. Chan appear to be intoxicated to you that evening?
Later in the evening, yes.
At any point in the night, did Jeremy Martin ever go outside?
He did, yes.
Was that after or before the argument that they had?
I believe it was during. They had a conversation before, and then he excused himself from the table, and they came back and then continued that conversation.
Do you know how long Jeremy was gone?
I don't know an exact time, but I think it was around a half an hour.
A half an hour?
Yes.
And when Jeremy Martin returned, did you see or hear any further arguments between him and Tai Chan?
Not immediately.
Okay. At some point?
Yes.
Can you describe after?
Later on in the night, they were at the bar service area, and I just heard their voices elevated. It wasn't a full yell, but they were louder than what I should have heard from a normal level of conversation.
At some point, did a manager ever intervene in any of this, or any employee at Dublin's?
Yes.
Tell me about what you observed with respect to that.
The manager just came over to the table and asked if they could lower their voices or calm down, or they were going to have to ask them to leave.
And when was it, do you remember, when the manager intervened with respect to the two instances that you described of arguments?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a timeline. When did the manager intervene? Was it before or after the first argument you observed?
It was after Jeremy had gone outside and then come back in.
Okay, so it was after the second argument?
Yes.
And then after that, did you see any further arguments between the two?
Not after they were at the bar service area.
Did you ever see either of them get physical?
No.
Did you ever see Mr. Chan get aggressive?
No.
Did you ever see Mr. Chan with clenched fists?
No.
You said that the argument seems to be about their work, right?
Yes.
How was it appearing? What was Jeremy's demeanor? Jeremy Martin's.
In the argument, they were just discussing things with each other. It was still a normal volume of conversation at the table, just trying to figure out. I didn't really understand what was going on again because I had come in so late in the conversation.
Did Jeremy ever appear to be upset?
Not that I recall.
You've given a prior statement testimony in this case, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall stating that Jeremy, with respect to what Ty was saying, that Jeremy got upset? Do you recall ever saying that?
If I could look at this statement, it might help me.
Sure, Judge Coach.
Yes, go ahead.
Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Have you ever described when Ty would say something to Jeremy that Jeremy got upset?
Yes.
And you gave this statement closer in time to the incident than today, right?
Yes.
Which would you say would be a more accurate description of what happened that night? The statement you gave then or the statement today?
Then.
Okay. So at some point, do you remember when everybody, and so can you describe for the jury when and the circumstances of how everybody left Dublin's?
I had class early the next morning and I had asked how they were going to get home, and when they told me that they didn't have a ride, and Jeremy also stated that he probably shouldn't drive, that I recommended to them that I could give them a ride home and tried to get them to leave.
Why did you think that, I mean, you said Jeremy had stated he shouldn't drive. Why did you think that Ty Chan couldn't drive?
I've been around Ty before at different functions, and so I knew that both of them had had something to drink, and if you've had something to drink, you just shouldn't drive.
And you said previously that Mr. Chan appeared to be intoxicated at that point?
Later in the night before we left, yes.
So you drove Mr. Martin and Mr. Chan to the hotel, right?
Yes.
And do you remember, I guess describe to the jury if you noticed anything unusual or any other arguments on the drive to the hotel?
Not any arguments, they just were bouncing back and forth in completely different conversations.
Did it seem like they were getting along, or?
Yes. They were just talking about, Ty was telling me thank you for driving me home, and he didn't want to put me out because I had class the next morning, and kept telling me how much he loved me, and Jeremy just kept keeping him talking while we were going, but they never argued.
And Ms. James, had you had anything to drink at all that night?
No.
Were you the only one who had nothing to drink?
I believe so, but I'm not sure.
And so, do you recall exactly what time it was, or approximately what time it was when you dropped them off in Encanto?
I know it was just before midnight, but I don't have an exact time.
So when you last saw your cousin, when they got out of the vehicle, what observations did you make when they got out of the vehicle?
When they got out of the vehicle, Jeremy had to help Ty out of my truck because it's an extended cab, so the doors are kind of complicated, and they each couldn't find the door handle to get out of the vehicle. But after they got out of the vehicle and closed the doors, they were had their arms around each other's shoulders walking into the hotel.
And the last time you saw your cousin, that night was when he was walking arm in arm with Martin into the hotel?
Sustained. That's already been answered.
Did you see them any other time in the evening?
After dropping them off?
Right.
No.
Okay. Pass the witness.
Thank you. Mr. D'Antonio, cross-examinations. James.
Good morning, Ms. Jane.
Morning.
James, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, I apologize. Ms. Jane, you are, well, you already mentioned Mr. Chan's second cousin, is that right?
Yes.
And when is the last time that you spoke to any of the Chan family about your testimony here today?
I don't think I ever have.
Gina, is that correct? So you never have talked to the Chan family about your testimony here today?
No.
Now, ma'am, would you say you have a close relationship with the Chan family?
Oh, can I get some clarification on what you would define as close?
Are you in frequent contact with the Chan family?
In the past, I've seen them 2 to 3 times a year at family functions like Thanksgiving, Christmas, things like that.
And your testimony today is not to help the Chan tell the truth, is that right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Your testimony today is here to not help Mr. Chan, but to tell the truth, is that right?
Yes.
Now, is it fair to say that on the night of October 27th, that the evening among the group you were with was friendly for the most part?
For the most part, yes.
And that when you witnessed Mr. Martin and Mr. Chan arguing, it was basically about nonsense, is that right?
Yes, I didn't understand anything of the conversation that they were having.
And it's also fair to say that most of that night it was conversational, not argumentative.
In the time that I was there, yes.
Now, you said at one point that Mr. Martin left the table area, is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that when Mr. Martin left, Mr. Chan was very upset?
Yes.
And later that evening, Deputy Martin tried to calm Mr. Chan down, is that right?
I don't know.
Okay. In a previous conversation with police officers, do you remember telling those police officers that Jeremy just kept getting him to calm down? Are them saying, just forget about it, we'll talk about it tomorrow?
Yes, that's correct.
And so, if I ask you again, that evening was Mr. Martin trying to calm down Tai Chan, what would be your answer?
Yes.
Let's fast forward to the fact that you were kind enough to give those gentlemen a ride. And you arrived back to the Incognito Hotel. And you stated on direct examination that the two were arm in arm as they exited the vehicle, is that right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that, in fact, Mr. Martin helped Mr. Chan out of the vehicle?
Yes.
And as I left that vehicle, you saw no indication of further conflict. Is that right?
That's correct.
questions? Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. D'Antoni. Ms. Garcia, is there any redirect?
Yes, one, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. James, I'm going to direct your attention to when Jeremy Martin left the bar for about 30 minutes and then returned. When he returned, did Ty ever seem to you like he was worried about his whereabouts? He was worried about Jeremy Martin?
Yes.
Let me have a counsel approach that. Is there another question? Yes. Ms. James, there is going to be some questions of you by the jury. Do you know, or do you, if you recall, that someone's credit card was declined that evening at Dublin's? And if so, whose?
I do not have any idea.
Again, would you explain to the jury why Mr. Martin needed to assist Mr. Chen out of the vehicle?
I had a Chevy Silverado that was an extended cab, and the door handles are in a really odd place, and a lot of people have trouble finding the door handle to get out of the vehicle, and that's what they were struggling to figure out when they were getting out of my truck at the hotel.
And that was the only reason?
To my knowledge.
Anything else from the jury? May Ms. James be excused? Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
No. Ms. James, thank you very much for your testimony. You're free to leave at this time.
Thank you.
And you have no further responsibilities to the trial.
Thank you.
Looking at counsel approach related to the next few tests. All right, let's go ahead and proceed with the next witness. And this is Ms.
Dr. Marchinsky.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, if you'd like to put your book down. me ask you to please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth that pertains to your law?
I will.
Thank you. Go ahead and say it and make yourself comfortable. And you can adjust that microphone to whatever height you'd like. You can begin by giving us your complete name and the spelling of your last name.
Cecile Marchinsky, Marczynski.
All right, thank you. Mr. Day, you can commence with your direct examination of Ms. Marchinsky. And forgive me, Ms. Marchinsky, do you carry a title?
I'm a professor of the Department of Psychological Science at Northern Kentucky University.
You carry a doctorate?
Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Marchinsky.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Marchinsky.
Good morning.
Where do you live?
I live in Alexandria, Kentucky,
Where is that? What part of Kentucky?
right near Cincinnati.
So near the Ohio border.
Yes.
And where do you work?
Northern Kentucky University.
And where is that?
It's also right at the north end of Kentucky near Cincinnati.
And what do you do at Northern Kentucky University?
I'm a professor in the Department of Psychological Science.
Could you tell us, is Northern Kentucky University a private or a public university?
It's a public institution.
And how many students are there at Northern Kentucky University?
Approximately 14,000.
Can you give the jury and the court some information about your educational background?
I received my Bachelor of Science degree in psychology in 1996 and my PhD in cognitive psychology 2001. My PhD is from McMaster University in Canada. Then after my PhD, I did 2 postdoctoral fellowships. One was with a neurologist in Canada in a cognitive neurology department at the University of Western Ontario. And then I spent 5 to 6 years at the University of Kentucky doing postdoctoral training in psychopharmacology, which is the effects of drugs on behavior. So I did postdoctoral training there, and then I also developed an independent line of research where I was a research assistant professor there until I came to Northern Kentucky University, where I'm currently residing in my current occupation.
All right, let me ask you, your field is called, is it, I have it right, it's behavioral psychopharmacology?
Yes, that's right. And I study humans.
So
Human behavioral psychopharmacology.
Let me write that, make sure I get it right. Sounds like all the classes I failed at college. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you said that is the effect of drugs on the brain.
That's right, and behavior.
Judge Day, are you seeking have her designated as an expert witness?
We will be.
Mr. Byers, is there going to be an objection?
There won't be an objection.
There will be?
Will not.
Will not. All right, so go ahead and just give a little bit of the background of the witness for the jury to be able to understand that since there is no objection from the state, the court is going to designate Dr. Marczynski as an expert witness in the field of human behavior and psychopharmacology.
Very good, Your Honor. Doctor, can you give us a little more information about exactly what that field is and what you do?
So I have an alcohol research lab where we bring in human subjects and we administer alcohol to them, and then we test them on a variety of different measures Some of it is simple things like breathalyzer readings. Some of it is objective measures like looking how they perform on a driving simulator or computer tasks or tasks that measure balance and coordination. And my expertise is combining drugs, so I look at the effects of energy drinks and alcohol and the effects of caffeine and alcohol.
What are energy drinks?
Energy drinks are caffeinated products. They usually have 2 to 3 times the caffeine that soft drinks have in them. They're relatively new products on the market, so there's less known about them. They have other ingredients in them, but the high caffeine content seems to be the primary psychoactive ingredient.
Can you give us the names of some of the brands of these energy drinks that you're researching?
We use Red Bull primarily because that's the one that most people combine with alcohol. But we've also used Monster, Rockstar, and then we've looked at the 5-hour energy shots, which are usually 2-ounce products that are, unlike soft drinks, they're not carbonated, they're more like a caffeinated, concentrated dose.
Doctor, do you ever publish any professional articles or publications or journals?
So I've published 50 scientific papers. That's the gold standard for dissemination of scientific research, where you conduct a study and then you submit it to a journal and then you get reviews back. And if the science is considered to be sound, then it gets published in a journal to be disseminated. So I have 50 of those papers. I have 2 textbooks. So I have a psychopharmacology textbook that is primarily used in undergraduate psychology classes. It's published by Wiley. It underwent scientific review, so it also is considered to be a strong resource for people in the field. And I've also published some book chapters, things like that.
Can you tell us, what are something called the National Institutes of Health?
So research costs money, and the work that I do tends to be fairly expensive. So as a researcher, I apply for grants. Research grants are funding that you receive from the federal government to conduct research on public health. So your federal tax dollars, a small portion of that is sent to the federal government, and it's allocated for health-related research. And I, as a scientist, can apply for those funds to do research on certain topics.
And have you done that with regard to the National Institutes of Health?
Yes, I've received over $1 million in federal research grants.
Has your work led to any significant policy changes or developments in the United States regarding public health?
My work that I published on the combined effects of caffeine and alcohol were used by the United States Food and Drug Administration determination that adding caffeine into alcohol is unsafe. So several years ago, there used to be pre-made products that had alcohol and caffeine in it together. So there were caffeinated beers, or there were caffeinated products that were like Four Loko or some of these other products where they're pre-made. And the FDA determined that those products are not safe for consumers, and they used my research to make that determination.
Is there, in fact, are there some labeling directions or orders made to those energy drinks following your research?
Yes, and the beverage industry has basically encouraged all energy drink manufacturers to put on their products, do not mix with alcohol. Partly by the FDA determination, but also partially they're protecting themselves from litigation.
Doctor, are you affiliated with or a member of any professional societies connected to your work?
I'm a fellow of the American Psychological Association. So a fellow status is usually something for someone who's considered to be a primary or preemptive expert in a field. I'm a member of a variety of different societies that are scientists interested in drug research, like the Research Society on Alcoholism and other such societies.
Thank you, Doctor. And as the court said, you've been identified as an expert here in the field of human behavioral psychopharmacology. And in connection with that, did we ask you to review some materials in this case?
Yes, you did.
And did we ask you to review those materials and based on your extensive professional judgment, experience, and education, come up with some evaluations of some of the facts?
Yes.
Dr. Marchinsky, can you tell us what you looked at in connection with your work in the Tai Chan and Jeremy Martin case?
I was asked to look at a variety of different materials. There were receipts from all of the 5 different locations where the 2 individuals went drinking that night. I was asked to look at a variety of different witness statements. So the statements that witnesses gave to police included statements from Nicole Janes, Vanessa Estrada, Joshua Sexauer, Ian Robles, and Sayavash Amini. I was also asked to look at the autopsy report for Jeremy Martin and the toxicology report for Jeremy Martin.
All right, let me start with Mr. Martin, Doctor. Based on what you reviewed and observed from the receipts and information and the witness statements and the reports, were you able to come to a conclusion as to what Jeremy Martin's blood alcohol concentration would be at the time of his death?
Yes, that was on the toxicology report.
And was your finding similar, consistent with the finding of the toxicology report?
My findings were extremely similar to what I saw in the toxicology report.
Do you recall what that number was for Jeremy Martin?
Do you want the information off the toxicology report?
With whatever yours was, whatever matched.
Okay. The toxicology report has an estimate of 0.119 grams per 100 milliliters.
Was there also a number that was lower than that?
Yes, and the different draw was a 0.102 grams per 100 milliliters.
So the range based on the 2 different draws was 0.102 to 0.119, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you have no reason to dispute the work of the Office of the Medical Investigator, right?
Not at all.
And similarly, Dr. Marchinsky, based on your analysis and the materials you reviewed, were you able to come to a conclusion about what Tai Chan's likely blood alcohol concentration would have been at the time of the shooting that night?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that was?
It was 0.24, and that's gram percent. And then I do have a range of values.
Can you tell us what the range of values was?
It could be as low as 0.21, and it could be as high as 0.27.
And what did you use to arrive at your estimation as to Tai Chan's blood alcohol content?
Based off the receipts and the witness statements, I took into account the amount of alcohol that was consumed at each of these different locations and the food that was consumed to determine, based on the updated Widmark equation, the estimated blood alcohol concentration.
And did you use any information regarding Mr. Chan's height or weight or anything like that?
Yes, the updated Widmark equation takes into account the body weight.
Did you have a body weight for Mr. Chan that you used?
Yes, the range, it was given to me that he was probably between 180 and 185 pounds.
And since you made those calculations based on his body weight, has anyone from the district attorney's office or any other organization provided you with any different information about his body weight?
No, they have not.
Has the district attorney's office contacted you before this trial to try to talk to you about your testimony?
No, I talked to them before the first trial, but not before this one.
Now, Dr. Marchinsky, can you give the jury some idea of what it means to arrive at a blood alcohol content. What does that mean as far as that number you gave us, 0.24? What is happening in a person's body if their blood alcohol content is 0.24?
Well, the legal limit for driving is 0.08, so that's what we consider to be intoxication. And the more and more intoxicated someone is, the more impaired they are. So this is a value that is 3 times the legal limit, so you can assume that this person is grossly intoxicated at the time of the shooting.
You said grossly intoxicated?
Yes.
Now, was there any information you had when you were making your evaluation as to the consumption of an energy drink, a Red Bull, is that right?
Yes.
And what was your understanding as to how many or what level of Red Bull drinks Mr. Chan had been consuming?
It appears that he consumed between 6 and 7 Red Bulls that night.
And was that being mixed with anything?
Vodka, primarily, although there was one drink with Jägermeister.
Can you tell us what that means, Dr. Marchinsky, in connection with your work, as far as someone consuming that much alcohol and that many energy drinks? That's your area, right? That's your field?
Yes, that's my area of expertise.
So when you have a mixture of those beverages, what is happening with an individual who's consuming that many energy drinks and that much vodka?
So we know several things from a variety of different laboratory studies. We know, first of all, that individuals who consume a lot of energy drinks with alcohol don't feel intoxicated. They don't feel quite as impaired. That finding was used by the FDA to excuse me, remove all the caffeinated pre-mixed products on the market. So the lowered feeling of intoxication also goes along with feelings of feeling more stimulated, and the experience of drinking is more rewarding because when alcohol is a sedative drug, that really makes you feel tired. And so you don't feel that when you have a lot of energy drinks. And so you drink more, you drink faster, you drink longer, you drink to higher doses. And then you also, based on some of our laboratory studies, we know that you have better motor control. So it can be fine motor control, that's something that you might see if you ask people to perform a computer task and look at how fast their reactions are. Or it can be gross motor control, meaning more of the large-scale motor behaviors that people perform, like walking, gait, balance, those sorts of things. The person does not look as intoxicated. And the problem with that is that it can be problematic for individuals watching that person, so a bartender can overserve easily because they don't see those objective signs that they're intoxicated. It can also be problematic in other circumstances too.
All right, Doctor, let me go through that with you, and let me start with what you call the Widmark equation and how you use that to get to the number, the 0.24 number. Can you tell us what that is? And also, as part of that, did you have to determine how many drinks you attributed to, say, Tai Chan, and how many to Mr. Martin?
Right, so if you have 2 individuals drinking, then you have to make sure that you separate out what alcohol you think went to each person. And, so if they order 2 drinks, you assume that one person drank the one and the other person drank the other. So earlier in the evening, that was relatively easy to do because there's only 2 people at a table and 1 receipt. The equation basically takes into account someone's body size. So the equation basically looks at, if you can think of the body as like a bucket, and there's a hole in the bucket, and that's the metabolism of the alcohol leaving the body. You can put alcohol in, and then you have to take into account what is leaving based on metabolism, and that's like through things like urine, but also exhaled breath or sweat. And so the calculation looks at how much is going in, and then how much is going out based on the metabolism. And you, based on, for example, in this situation, I looked at what was probably consumed based on looking at the receipts, what went in, and then the amount of time. So the receipts are time stamped, so you have a pretty good idea about what time people are drinking certain things.
Were you also using the witness statements?
Yes, the witness statements also gave timelines.
Was that helpful as far as determining who was drinking what and when?
Yes, you have some people who were sober at the time.
So how did mathematically, can you tell us how you, using the math and that Widmark equation, how you get to the 0.24 number in that range you gave us?
So you input the milligrams of alcohol, and then you apply the equation, including the body weight, and subtract out the time based on the metabolism, essentially. The Widmark equation has been used for decades. It's relatively easy to use. It's just basically multiplication, division, subtraction. And it's readily available on most websites. Most hospitals or other places have the Widmark equation where you can put in that information yourself.
And so using that Widmark equation, is that how you got to the numbers on Mr. Martin that matched exactly with the numbers on the medical investigator's report?
Yeah, so my number was slightly higher for Mr. Martin, but that assumes an empty stomach. So when you have food in your stomach, that slows the absorption of alcohol. So the amount that my amount was higher, I applied that to subtract it from my Widmark estimate for Tai Chan, and then because they consumed about the same food that night, you can assume that that applies to both individuals, and that's where I came to my final number.
Again, did you use the witness statements to help you determine what food was consumed?
Yes.
So I want to ask you about what you said about it sounded like the stimulant parts of energy drinks. What does that do to, combined with the alcohol, what does that do to things like motor skills and physical skills?
So in a variety of different studies, we've found that the energy drinks will prevent you to see the full extent of the motor impairment you would expect based on the alcohol by itself. So one thing you can look at is body sway. So is the person standing upright, or are they having difficulty maintaining their balance? You would expect the more alcohol people consume, the more you will get pronounced body sway. If you mix in the energy drink, you don't see that body sway to the same degree.
What about walking? How would the person appear if they were walking under those same circumstances?
You see the same issue where under alcohol impairment, you would expect the person to have difficulty walking straight or walking without assistance or stumbling. With the energy drink present, you don't seem to see that pronounced impairment. And that's been shown not only in my work in my lab, but it's been shown in animal studies. So you can give animals alcohol and they will look motor impaired. And if you add in caffeine, they don't seem to look as impaired.
So the person's ability to balance, if they were under the influence to the level that you said, say 0.24, what about the ability to balance? Would they look closer to being in a sober state or in an intoxicated state?
If it were just the alcohol by itself, 0.24, they should be having extreme difficulties with balance and coordination and gait and walking. With the energy drink present, then you would expect that to not be as pronounced.
Doesn't that seem, for lack of a better word, counterintuitive to what we know about people who seem intoxicated? What is it that makes the difference?
Well, they're still intoxicated, so it's not that it changes their blood alcohol concentration in any way. They're still cognitively impaired, so any aspect of thinking, like decision-making, all those sorts of things, they are equally impaired by the alcohol based on the estimated blood alcohol concentration. There's work that has been done in certain labs to suggest that we know, for example, the cerebellum, the structure at the base of the brain that is important for motor control. Alcohol constricts blood vessels in that area, and caffeine prevents that from happening. So if you mix in caffeine, you don't see that to the same degree. So there seems to be fairly good recent scientific evidence suggesting why we see these odds effects on motor impairment when you mix in large doses of caffeine or energy drinks with alcohol.
And do energy drinks all contain the same ingredients, or are there varieties or differences among different products?
There are a little bit of differences among products. Energy drinks are proprietary products because the companies have their own formulations, but from my extensive research on the topic, a lot of these energy drinks are about the same in components. The primary psychoactive ingredient is the high level of caffeine.
And is that one of the areas that you focus on in your research, is the caffeine effect on alcohol?
Yes, but I always use the energy drinks as well to make sure that the findings apply to both scenarios.
Doctor, a few minutes ago you talked about the effects on the brain. Can you give us some idea of the concepts that are at play here in terms of how the energy drinks plus the alcohol, say vodka in this case, affect brain function?
So alcohol is a sedative drug, which means it's going to initially just calm the brain down, but then eventually start shutting down brain functions. The effects that you see initially when an individual starts drinking is that the first structures at the front of the brain are affected, the prefrontal cortex and the frontal cortex structures. So the first things that you'll notice in early onset of drinking is all those impulse control and decision-making functions, those tend to deteriorate. If the person continues to drink, then more and more of the brain is affected. It continues to sedate more and more of the brain. If the person continues to drink to very high levels, it can eventually affect all the breathing and heart rate functions, which the alcohol sort of starts at the front and then eventually will take over the effects of all of the brain. And those breathing and heart rate structures are actually at the top of your spinal cord at the very lowest parts of your brain. So as a sedative drug, it could induce death. Now, if the energy drinks are present, it seems to be that the effects of the energy drinks are really having specific effects on the motor control centers. So they're counteracting the alcohol at the lower level cerebellum structure that is important for motor control. And then our thought is that improved balance and coordination is why people think they're not as intoxicated, because they're getting that feedback, oh, I'm not stumbling, I'm not, looking as impaired. Other people aren't saying I'm impaired, so probably I'm not impaired. And so they're using the feedback from their own motor control, but probably feedback from other people about what is happening here to make that determination that they're less intoxicated.
So, doctor, is it possible that someone whose higher brain was affected by alcohol at the level of 0.24, for example, blood alcohol content, that the lower brain wouldn't be affected? They would be able to do things instinctively or based on training, whatever it is, even though that person has consumed large amounts of alcohol, as we see in the number?
Yeah, so just to explain a little bit, oftentimes drug researchers, we try and explain the brain as sort of like a go-stop system, or like the brakes and gas, like you would have in a car. And so there's a motivation system that's kind of in the middle of the brain where your ears are moving inward, and that's what makes you do things. It's the go system. It's not very flexible. You just kind of react to things, and that is maintained longer than you would expect in intoxication than the front areas of the brain that are kind of like your brakes, that make you stop, weigh in, think about things. So in intoxication, you would expect that those brakes in the front, those are the first things to go when someone starts drinking, but that leaves the motivation centers, the GO system, still able to respond.
What about the area of, say, a human affected by a 0.24 blood alcohol content and the issue of threat detection or reacting to a perceived threat? Where would that, what part of the brain would that be located?
So threat detection is a very lower level function. So you would imagine that threat detection is going to be those low level structures at ear level moving inwards. So part of detection of threat is the quick awareness that you're in danger, and then the emotional response that you're in danger, and those are all very low level structures in sort of the amygdala in the center of the brain, low level structures.
So you wouldn't necessarily need the upper brain to be functioning perfectly to react to a threat.
That's a correct statement.
So if a person at the level of intoxication that you found Tai Chan to be in, could that person act physically and successfully to defend themselves against a perceived physical threat?
Yes.
Are there survival instincts? Is that the same thing based on the same part of the brain? Is that, am I defining that properly? Would survival instincts be the same thing you're talking about?
Yes.
And the higher part of the brain, is it the frontal lobe where human beings make plans and preparations and deliberations and things?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's that part of the brain, the higher part, that's affected. For example, someone who has a 0.24 blood alcohol content, that's where the effect would be most pronounced. Am I right in that?
That would be the area that's most pronounced. It's the area that's first affected by alcohol, and by and large, it is an area that is quite sensitive to the effects of alcohol. And so at 0.24, you can't imagine that somebody is using that part of the brain effectively.
So at 0.24 blood alcohol content, is that person functioning to make plans and preparations and deliberations or not?
Unlikely, no.
Can you give us some examples of higher level, what are some of the common examples of the behavioral effects of alcohol on the decision-making process and the deliberative processes at, say, a 0.24 blood alcohol content on the upper brain, on the decision-making part?
Well, I think at 0.24, they aren't making deliberative processing of information or making a plan. I think it's at that level of intoxication. Certainly for someone who had just consumed alcohol, they probably are at the point where they're starting to lose consciousness. But the arousal state that you get from the energy drinks probably is keeping the person awake, and so they're not losing consciousness, but they're not using the front part of their brain to make decisions or anything like that.
And Dr. Martinsky, if I pose to you the question of if the crime of first-degree murder in New Mexico requires deliberation and planning and intent, what would you say, how would that apply to someone who is at a level of intoxication at 0.24 blood alcohol content?
Objection, Your Honor. Engage in proper to the jury.
Your Honor, that's expert witness.
Please approach. Sustaining the objection, but will allow additional questions based on the guidance that the court is giving.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Martinsky, what is your opinion of the capability of an individual with described and whether that person is able to formulate a deliberate intent to commit an act.
I think they are not able to form a deliberate intent.
Got a moment.
Yes, go ahead.
Have you agreed to do a direct examination? Pass the witnesses.
It's going to be 12:30. We're going to go ahead and recess till 1:30. Please, this is more than